Yeah.
So I was wondering what your relationship was with that one-on-one stuff.
Yeah.
Still
I mean,
valuable.
in some ways I do miss some of the one-to-one stuff that I do or did do. And so that's why I've kind of held on to some of it. Because you just cannot being one-on-one with someone in a room and developing that depth of relationship with someone where that therapy room becomes their sanctuary. And, you know, that's an incredible privilege, that kind of work. And I love it. But there is that sense of, okay, I could sit in this room and, you know, work with one person at a time, or I could make a video and share this idea with potentially a couple of million people, which, you know, has become a real passion. And that I recognize that it just didn't interest me. The numbers and the, you know, kind of business side of it just didn't really figure for me. It was genuinely just the feedback, the messages and the emails. You know, I was going through them and thought was, I can't stop now. I can't stop doing this. So people are checking in every day to see what the next video is, or asking for specific topics because they're genuinely struggling with something. If I can help in some small way, then I really should.
So in terms of that feedback that you're getting from social media, I've come to learn that it's not all great. As in, I'm not saying the feedback isn't all great, but the general like stress and pressure and expectation and constant feedback can be detrimental in many ways as well. Talk to me about your relationship with having millions and millions of people that can message you at any time, letting you know whatever they're thinking, and how you process that.
Yeah, people following probably wouldn't believe this. I bounce around in my videos like anything, but I'm actually a very introverted, shy person. You know, my ideal day is kind of at home alone with a book probably. And so, you know, the idea of being public and being seen by people was not a comfortable one. It's something that I kind of endured for the cause, if you see what I mean, for the idea of, oh, this could help someone who's in need. So that's something I've had to work through and do a lot of kind of practicing what I preach, you know, being uncomfortable for the sake of something that I value or that I believe in. And yeah, I mean, I did a video on the mental filter, this kind of thought bias that we all have, and used the example of, you know, with the kind of comments and feedback and stuff like that, that you can have 100 positive comments and you will scroll through them to find the one that's not positive, even if it's neutral, you know, or God forbid, negative, because you're built to do that. You're built to look for any signs that this is not okay, or that it's all going to collapse and everyone's going to hate you. And so actually doing the whole thing has made me practice what I preach, because I have to, because it's not an easy situation to be in, is it? You're vulnerable when you're putting yourself online, or, you know, as much as I do, when you're putting yourself out there, it's a vulnerable place to be. And a lot of people look on and think it's easy, and it's really not. No, I have a newfound respect for everyone who kind of, you know, is brave enough to do that.
What you were describing there, that scrolling through comments looking for the bad one, is something I think we can all relate to, because I will get 99.9% like great comments, and then it'll be, as you say, the one that's either that's critical or that feels personal. It's if someone's like criticizing something that I've like done, I don't really care. It's when they are criticizing who I am, I think I find it hardest. And so I wanted to understand why that was, and I started doing some reading and some writing about this topic and understanding the nature, if we go back in our history as humans, of rejection and what that used to mean when I was a human, the idea of being like kicked out of my tribe,
yeah, and
the threat that would put me under if I was removed from my tribe, and this idea of rejection. And really, like, a lot of rejection, this is kind of what I came to the conclusion of. When someone says something like that, it's almost like, for me, it feels like a threat of rejection, a threat of being expelled from the tribe or whatever. Obviously not. Obviously that is not the truth, but deep within me somewhere, that desire to fit in and be accepted by the tribe is still there. So having millions of people being able to give me feedback, and some of them seemingly rejecting me from the tribe or saying that I don't fit, or whatever, is difficult. Is that like, that's a lot of words, but does that make any sense?
Yeah, because the feeling comes before the rational thought about
Yes.
it. So, you know, your body has that reaction before you're able to consider that, you know, this isn't your only community, or this isn't your family, or people that are sort of you're dependent on, and that kind of thing. So I think the feeling will always be there, and it's always difficult, isn't it? But then you can override that with what comes next. So it's not about never having that feeling. And I hate it when people kind of say online, you know, just to stop caring what everybody thinks. And that is impossible, because you're built to care what people think of you. And you probably wouldn't function in a society that well if you didn't care what anybody thought of you. It's about how you then manage it. So when those thoughts come along about, you know, a negative comment, it's what do you do next with what comes up. So yeah, it's really about how you kind of respond to the thoughts that come up after.
And is it in those moments of rejection, is it really like the story we tell ourselves about what that rejection means to us? I'm thinking now more broadly about romantic rejection. I'm dating someone, she says, you're dumped. Like, the harm surely isn't in the separation. Surely, for me, it's always felt like, I got to the point where I realized that it was more Steve's subconscious brain is telling himself he's a scumbag and not beautiful and not smart because of this rejection. Is that really where the harm is done? Like that self-inflicted self-story?
Yeah, so I mean, rejection is difficult for everybody, isn't it? But certainly if rejection taps into what we call a kind of core belief. So if someone grew up with a core belief around being unlovable, for example, because maybe their parents were inconsistent in their care, for example. So they you know, and you don't think about these beliefs consciously all the time. You know, they're not at the forefront of your thought processes, but they will influence how you feel, and they'll influence how you behave and the choices that you make. So what happens is when we have a core belief that is a sort of damaging one or detrimental one, we develop sort of rules for living around that help us to keep it at bay. So it might be, you know, if I can just be the perfect business owner and the perfect boyfriend and the perfect dad, then no one will reject me and everything will be okay. And so you set yourself these rules for living that if at some point, inevitably, you break, or there's signs that you're not going to be able to keep up with them. And what that does is when there's signs that you're not going to keep up with those rules for living, it kind of triggers that core belief to come to the forefront. And that's when you get that rush of kind of psychological distress, because it's a distressing thing to believe about yourself. And so that's when it can cause people real problems, when that sort of damaging core belief is being triggered on a regular basis, for example, maybe because it's a turbulent relationship or whatever the situation is. And that's when you can work not only on the present stuff, but on the core beliefs and looking at how those are playing out in relationships.
And how do you get to the heart of understanding what your core beliefs are? Because I went through life, and I think I got to about 24 years old without being in a relationship. And when I asked myself what my core beliefs were as it relates to relationships, I realized that they were heavily shaped by watching my parents' like toxic relationship and this belief that relationships were prison. I thought my dad was in prison for my entire childhood. That's what I thought. I thought he was trapped in prison because he was in a relationship with my mother, because they were very argumentative, shall we say.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I was 24, and I think because of journaling and writing and really this podcast, that I was able to realize that I even thought that. And I was having this like avoidant behavioral pattern where the minute I would pursue someone romantically, and the minute they would accept my advances, I would run for the hills and try and dissuade them out of being in a relationship with me. And I had no idea that core belief was in the back of my control center of my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a really fascinating therapy called cat therapy, actually. It's cognitive.
About your relationship with having millions and millions of people that can message you at any time, letting you know whatever they're thinking and how you process that.
Yeah,